The lights in that house never turned off. Not once in 3 years. Subscribe now, because this story only gets more unsettling the longer I paid attention to what was happening next door. I moved onto Meridian Street about 3 years ago, a quiet residential block. Nothing remarkable about it except for the house directly across from mine. A man named Walter lived there alone, or at least that's what I assumed for the first several months. Older, kept to himself, polite enough on the rare occasion we crossed paths at the mailbox. Nothing about him screamed danger. That's what made everything after so hard to process. The first thing I noticed gradually was that one upstairs window never went dark. Not late at night, not during storms, not ever. I told myself it was just a hallway light left on by habit. People do that. Then I started noticing deliveries. Groceries, far more than one man living alone would need. Bags of rice, cases of bottled water, delivered every few weeks like clockwork. Once I saw the delivery driver hesitate at the door, glance back toward the street like he wanted to say something to someone, then just leave the bags and go. About 6 months in, my neighbor on the other side, an older man named Frank who'd lived on the block for decades, mentioned something offhand while we were both out with our trash cans. He said Walter used to have a son living with him. A teenager, maybe 19 or 20 by now, but Frank hadn't seen the kid outside in years. Not walking to school, not driving away in the mornings. Nothing. I didn't think much of it at the time. Some families just keep to themselves. It was the sounds that changed things for me. Faint at first, muffled thuds through the shared fence line. Late at night, the kind of sound you convince yourself is just someone rearranging furniture. Then one night, around 1 a.m., I heard something that stopped me cold. A voice, young, male, shouting something I couldn't make out, cut off abruptly mid-sentence. I stood at my window for almost 20 minutes afterward. The house looked the same as always. That one window, lit, unmoving, like it had never once gone dark in 3 years. I told myself I was overreacting. I nearly convinced myself of it entirely, until the night I saw Walter outside past midnight, dragging something heavy wrapped in a tarp from his garage into the backyard. It could have been anything, old furniture, yard debris, 100 boring explanations. But the way he kept glancing at the houses around him while he did it, checking, recalculating, made my stomach turn in a way I couldn't rationalize away. I brought it up with Frank again. This time he didn't brush it off. He admitted he'd had the same bad feeling for years, but never knew what to do with it. No proof, nothing concrete, just a slow accumulation of things that individually meant nothing and together meant everything. That was the night I decided I couldn't just keep watching. I didn't confront Walter directly. I wasn't stupid enough for that. Instead, I called the non-emergency police line and explained everything as calmly as I could. The constant grocery deliveries, the missing son no one had seen in years, the light that never turned off, the sounds through the fence, the late-night tarp. I fully expected them to tell me it wasn't enough to act on. They sent a welfare check anyway. I watched from my window as 2 officers knocked on Walter's door. He answered, calm, cooperative, letting them inside without hesitation, which almost made me feel foolish for calling at all. They were inside for nearly 40 minutes. When it finally came back out, one officer was on his radio, urgent, calling for backup. Walter came out in handcuffs minutes later, and not long after, paramedics arrived, then more police, then unmarked cars that stayed for most of the following day. I never got the full story. The family, understandably, didn't want details circulating around the neighborhood, and most of what actually happened in that house has stayed sealed in a case file I'll never see. What I do know is that the son Frank mentioned was found alive inside, and that the light in that upstairs window finally went dark for the first time in 3 years. I think about how close I came to just minding my own business the way you're taught to do with neighbors. Some things really aren't your concern. But every so often, the quiet, easily dismissed details, the ones you talk yourself out of every single time, are the only things standing between someone and staying invisible. I've learned since then that trusting the discomfort, even without proof, even when you feel ridiculous for noticing, matters more than staying polite.